This is Everything is Personal with Len May.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, as always, welcome to Everything is Personal with my wonderful co-host, Mr. John Small. Oh,
thank you.
Get an applause. An applause
Yeah.
today. It's wonderful. Love
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's absolutely a pleasure to be here and very excited about our guest today.
Likewise. Yeah. I think we should just jump into introducing our guest since our guest has been patiently waiting for so long. I want to introduce, I'm very excited, by the way, because I'll tell you, let me say, I want to introduce Dr. Michelle Weiner, and I can give a whole overview, the board certified and pain management and all that stuff. But I'll tell you one thing from personal experience. There is a lot of cannabis and endocannabinoid system doctors that I meet everywhere throughout the world in my travels. And they really know very little. They just, prescribe or recommend or suggest cannabis. They don't really understand how cannabis works within the body. And first of all, Michelle's a badass. We've been on the panels and we've talked at different events, and we've had business interaction before. So I can, from a personal standpoint, I can assure you that Michelle really knows what she's talking about when it comes to the endocannabinoid system. So without further ado, there's Dr. Michelle Weiner. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So can you do a much better job than me telling people a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. So I am originally from New York, and I was always very athletic. Yeah.
East Coast.
I was always very athletic, very into nutrition. And, I decided to become a physician. I went to University of Florida, so I'm a Gator. And then that's kind of when I became a Floridian, and, very into health and wellness always. And I decided to study physical medicine and rehabilitation, which really takes a look at the whole body. I'm a DO, so I'm more holistic. I have my master's in public health, and I'm very interested in research and evidence-based science. And then I decided to do a pain fellowship because I wanted to be a little bit more interventional and really kind of look at the whole person. And I realized, how many people are in pain. My grandma suffered from chronic pain, and that kind of really woke me up to how is medicine treating people in chronic pain. And I realized that I learned all these interventions, but, they were kind of Band-Aids, or they were, for acute pain and not really for chronic pain. And I'm in South Florida. I have all these patients on chronic opioids. And that's just not how we're supposed to be treating patients in pain. And nobody was really addressing the emotional, or what I call biopsychosocial component of pain. And people are suffering, and there's, an emotional attachment or trauma or quality of life issues attached to that. So cannabis became legal 4.5 years ago in 2016. I was one of the first recommending physicians because, I just knew that there had to be something to this. There has to be a reason why people were using it in other states. And I wanted to stop just doing what I learned as, a textbook or whatever was FDA approved, and really have relationships with my patients. That's kind of why I decided to be a doctor. And so I started integrating CBD and cannabis into the practice. And then I started doing my own research. Over 40% of our patients weaned off of opioids, and another 40% decreased it significantly. And I realized that it's much more than, one medication for one specific receptor. There's so many components to pain, and people just really, doctors are frustrated. We don't have that many tools, and the tools that we have, it has to be covered by insurance, and then there's a stigma behind it. And so I just started learning as much as I could. And based on the thousands of patients I have, it's very difficult to say anything back to me, because I realize how satisfied my patients are. I realize how satisfying my job is now. I was kind of frustrated where I was before. And so I've treated patients, not just for pain, but Parkinson's, cancer, epilepsy, a little bit of everything. And I really just was curious. And I think that curiosity is an important component being a physician. We have to challenge what we've learned, and we have to also evolve with the times. And if we see that, all these people are on antidepressants and they're not working, or all these people are on opioids, they still have 10 out of 10 pain, why am I going to give you the same medication? So I learned about the endocannabinoid system. I trained a lot of the physicians in Florida. I'm a huge advocate, and I really kind of encourage the patient to, like we talk about, personalized medicine, to
Right.
take inventory of themselves, to get to know their body a little bit better, and to not just rely on the physician. And so that's really my practice now. It's much more personalized medicine, and really integrating all different natural alternatives into everybody's daily life, promoting nutrition, lifestyle changes, not just using the cannabis plant, but there's much more to optimizing our endocannabinoid system. So that's really how I've evolved, and now I'm very interested in a lot of cannabis research. I have a good affiliation with University of Miami. We just got $75,000 from the state to research seniors who are taking cannabis. So a lot of exciting stuff is going on. We're trying to get Florida to we already have like 470,000 patients actually. So things are moving around nicely here. So we're very happy with our program here.
Yeah, that's one. I think one of the keys that you said, is this me that's giving feedback?
I think it's coming from Michelle's computer.
Okay, let me
Michelle, do you mind muting when we talk? I don't know why that's happening, but thank you.
I'll try it again. I was just saying that what you said and all that I found like super important is the whole thing of being curious. And I don't think enough people, healthcare professionals in general, whatever they were taught. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a healthcare professional, but I've dealt with enough people around the world where they had the blinders on. So this is what they learn in school, and this is what they think is the best way to approach a condition. And everything else, the first thing they say is, show me the double-blind studies, show me the clinical trials. And I'm like, well, they don't exist for various reasons. And there are some that do exist. But what do you think about anecdotal research from thousands and thousands of people that is documented? And to be able to, kind of have that curiosity and ask the right questions, I think that is really an anomaly in the medical profession. I'm hoping that more people will start kind of, gravitating towards that and using their curiosity and just asking questions and looking at the data, like yourself and other healthcare professionals and companies like our company, and they're collecting and showing people that this is really something that's effective. And I like what you said about the entire endocannabinoid system. We're not talking about just phytocannabinoids. We're talking about vitamins and supplements and nutrients and all these different things, and are meant to empower somebody to take better control and have that relationship with their healthcare professional so they can work on these conditions as preventative measures instead of just pinpointing to it hurts, let me put a Band-Aid on that pain. So just the question, I guess, around that is how did you kind of come up with that approach? And are you also collaborating with other healthcare professionals that are looking at what you're doing and kind of influencing them to do the same?
So I actually read an amazing book called Good Chemistry by Julie Holland. I'm sure you guys have heard of that.
Mhm.
And she really opened me up to consciousness and connection, right? And so cannabis, people say it's a side effect to have the ability to alter your consciousness. And I think that when we use it for medicinal benefits, obviously, like I say to everybody, if you're using cannabis, even if it's recreational, it's probably for a medicinal benefit. And I've always been pretty, understanding of that. But I like the patient to understand why they're using it. And before they choose to use it, to kind of check in with their, like, it's set and setting, that's the most important thing, right? So the point is that what I've realized over time is that some people's nervous system is just kind of heightened, let's say. We call it central sensitization, where you have one trauma or like I just had a patient today. She had mold toxicity, then she had a death in her family, and then she developed fibromyalgia, chronic migraines, chronic fatigue. So what happens is your body just doesn't really calm down, and you have this excitotoxic state that you're living in where your tolerance to the alarm going off is pretty low, you know. And those are the patients I kept seeing. I kept seeing the fibromyalgia where nothing works, but that's because we don't understand the mechanism. And so I started doing my own research, and you know, that's kind of how I started incorporating ketamine assisted psychotherapy into the practice and cannabis assisted psychotherapy, because there's a lot of other, you know, there's a lot of relationships with our opioid receptors and our cannabinoid receptors, but also the NMDA receptor, which is where ketamine works. So we have this wind up phenomenon where things just kind of continue and they're spiraling, and we're trying to stop it, but there's not much we can stop it with. So sometimes having a break in your day where you can really just rest, you know, breath work can do that. Walking in nature is great as well. But sometimes people need that catalyst to kind of open up. Like, I have a therapist I work with, they can use cannabis and the therapy session is going to be completely different, right? Same thing with ketamine assisted psychotherapy. So it's really just kind of, people are stuck right now, and especially with the pandemic, there's a lot of, you know, isolation, lack of connection, and it's a time to kind of bridge that filter between, you know, your consciousness and your non-ordinary states of consciousness. And cannabis really can help people get there, can just take a break from the constant rumination and depression and the constant anxiety of the future. So it's amazing plant, obviously we know that, but it also affects so many different receptors. So it's getting the physicians educated on stopping thinking in that single receptor model. Like, serotonin's our happy neurotransmitter, you know, there's 16 serotonin receptors. We can do a lot with mapping the brain based on even the feelings that we have, based on, you know, substances or certain techniques that allow us to get there.
Sorry, John muted me while you were talking, so because I kept saying, yeah,
And
and
then it would echo.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in complete agreement with what you were saying. The question and you're right, and I had this conversation with Dr. Miri in Israel. They call him Dedi, for those of you that may have heard of him. He talked about, you know, cannabis. He was talking about apoptosis specifically for cancer cells, and he was saying that in his lab, in his models, there's 3 receptor bindings. I know we're probably getting geeky and sciencey for our audience. We're like, holy shit, what receptor? What
I
the hell are you
like it.
talking about? Yeah, but it's like there's 3 receptor bindings that he saw in his lab for apoptosis. So you're absolutely right. There's multiple receptors, not just like, this is where, you know, the whole GW pharma model of let's single a molecule, let's single a receptor. You have this amazing plant. Why not utilize all the different components and look at the different combinations of the two, or of multiple components? Question for you that I had was about stigma. Do you still see within the physician community and the general healthcare practitioner community, is there still like a pretty prevalent stigma associated with cannabis, even though it's legal in you know, most of the country and in the state that you're operating in?
So to answer the stigma question, it's, you know, first of all, it's a cultural thing, I think. You know, being in South Florida, you know, we have a very diverse population here. In terms of like the way that physicians look at it, of course, they always want the double-blind, placebo-controlled clinical trials. And we all know about being a Schedule 1, how difficult that is to do. But I really do believe that physicians see their patients getting better. And so even though we are advancing with research, patients will just say, you know, they're hesitant to tell their doctors that they're using cannabis, but when they do and they give them that information, they say, well, you know, I had a patient today who's been on 3 different sleep meds, and finally the primary sent him to me. I'm like, if there's one thing cannabis can do, it can help you sleep. And if you're worried about the high, you're sleeping, you know. And there's actually so many ways of minimizing the high, and we always talk about the terpenes and how we can, you know, like the Taming THC, Ethan Russo article, of course, using the terpenes and CBD to minimize the amount of THC people need. But I think that I'm not getting as much of an issue with stigma, because I really think that people are realizing that Western medicine doesn't work for chronic conditions, and that people who are on current medications, they don't want to escalate their dose. They actually just want to decrease their pharmaceuticals. So, you know, cannabis being so non-toxic and, you know, being a pain doctor, it doesn't really intimidate me, because considering I am prescribing opioids anyway, I'm trying to really get people off of these medications. So I don't, at this point, I don't have such an issue with stigma. You know, I think that a lot of people are wondering where this is going, and if, Florida becomes an adult use state, what's going to happen there. But we've even started having the conversation about decriminalizing psilocybin in South Florida, because we want to not repeat what happened with cannabis, which is so much. We're still doing a marijuana 101 lecture, and it's 4.5 years into it. And so we're trying to really educate people on the current research that MAPS has, for example, and get it out there now, so that when something does happen, we don't have to start from square one. So stigma, I think that there's certain cultures that are very, to be honest, like the Hispanic population, they're huge in South Florida. The older population has a very bad stigma about cannabis. And the first thing I always say is, you don't have to smoke it, and you don't have to get high. And just to speak in layman terms sometimes helps them feel a little bit better. But a lot of times they're just so helpless that they just want hope. And that's why they're coming to me.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate that some people use it as like a last resort, where they should be using it as a supplement to supplement their overall health and wellness. But I think that's still left over from many generations prior to Nancy Reagan, even before that, and Richard Nixon, all that stuff. So it'll take a little bit of time to get it past that. All right, so let's get into the fun stuff that I'm really curious.
Are we going to talk about ketamine now? Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about
fun.
ketamine. I went to a ketamine lecture, and this guy, Dr. Jeff, explained it in a way that I've never heard anybody explain. He explained what chandelier cells are in the brain, and I never really understood this whole concept of this, because cells, when they talk, they go through a neurotransmitter, and there's a synapse. And the chandelier cells are able. Michelle's nodding, for those of you to know, because she's like, yeah, you keep talking. That let me correct you. But all right, let me see. Anyway, so
Being very
the visual,
polite.
I'll just paint this visual the way I understand it. So these chandelier cells can communicate without the synapse, and when they do, they sort of squeeze the other cells and from being able to form new productive memories. So a lot of people with PTSD have this rotation, and by the way, there are genotypes that are associated with that keep replaying the same movie over and over, and they have stress reactivity genotypes associated with that. So what happens is, and I saw a visual of this in a slide in a little presentation, when ketamine is injected intramuscularly, the chandelier cell opens up like a flower, and it assumes that ketamine, and it releases that hold. So you're able to start making new memories, and people come out of there like, oh my God, I saw this, I saw that. But here's the challenge, I think, with ketamine, with like other substances. If you don't have somebody who's a therapist or somebody who's trained to be able to pick up on that after the fact, you're going to revert back to your same old movie. You have to be able to guide people towards that light. So that's my presentation I got. Michelle, do you have any?
I love it. No, that's great. I mean, well, to be honest, ketamine has so many mechanisms, right? And there's still probably more. So like, for example, it obviously is an NMDA receptor antagonist, right? Which is kind of in that central sensitization model, really having to do with glutamate, our hyper excited neurotransmitter. So that's the main mechanism. But then, it also affects our AMPA receptor, which affects BDNF, and that's our brain-derived neurotrophic factor. So that's how we create neurogenesis. THC, CBD also creates neurogenesis, right? And there's actually an overlap. There's been studies actually showing how ketamine and the endocannabinoid system actually, correlate. And similarly, there's like 5-HT2A is our classic, psychedelic receptor, and there's crosstalk between that and our CB1 receptor. So actually, you can consider cannabis a psychedelic, because the CB1 actually forms this dimer with 5-HT2A. But either way, so ketamine has a lot of different mechanisms, but to put it, the way I put it to people is it's like what you're saying, it's kind of de-patterning, right? And then adapting to a new mindset. So a lot of it is that ego dissolution, getting rid of your personal narrative, kind of being unstuck. And very similar to what you're saying, you have your amygdala and your hippocampus, right? Where you have your fear response and your memories. And so there's all different ways of trying to decrease the connectivity between parts of the brain. Like our default mode network, that is a place where we default to. It's where we keep our personal narrative, our story, who we are, right? Like who you think I am is what my default mode kind of presents to you. And most people need to change their default mode because they have very negative self-talk, or they have, fears that come up. And so the most important thing I will say with ketamine is that you have proper preparation and integration. And that's because even though it's like cannabis, it's dose dependent, and there's multiple routes of administration. I like intramuscular, you can do sublingual, IV, but you need to be prepared. And by prepared, I mean, first of all, you have to be in a very safe place. You have to feel confident with your physician or your therapist. And also the setting has to be, one that you're able to open up in, and your mindset. You have to have a specific intention. This isn't just like, let's do psycho spiritual growth and have a good time. This is, what is the intention? Because I'll treat a fibromyalgia patient, and what comes up during their session is they were raped, and I'm treating them for pain. They never told me about that. And so clearly I need the therapist in the next 48 hours to have a therapy session with them to kind of talk about this. Because a lot of things, like one of the best books is a book called Your Body Keeps the Score. The body keeps the score. So your body keeps the score of what has happened to you over time. If you end up having trauma and you have pain in a certain place, I know it sounds ridiculous, but sometimes it's actually more of an emotional trauma that just kind of gets stuck in the body. And so you need that somatic release. That's why exercise and meditation is amazing. But ketamine really allows you to kind of dampen that default mode and open up to more opportunities, or not to be so stuck in that perspective. And I also love cannabis for that reason, right? So someone can use cannabis, and within 5 minutes, wherever they felt like they were, in a specific position where they were, let's say, stuck, they can just kind of open their mind, be present to that moment, and out of their fears. So a lot of it is getting rid of emotional trauma and different types of suffering. It can help with pain, especially nerve pain. However, the problem is ketamine, we do it once a week for 6 sessions, and we have a therapy session, within 48 hours after, to kind of discuss what comes up, set an intention for the next session. However, after those 6 weeks, the people who don't have therapy are more likely to relapse earlier on. And then a lot of times within 3 months, people start to relapse again. And so, my fear is really creating a ketamine epidemic, right? The fact that people think that they could microdose ketamine the way that people are microdosing psilocybin is a huge issue, especially on the West Coast. People are getting the, oral troches sent to their house, the lozenges sent to the house. And, at home, you can do it with a sitter and, some guidance, but it's not, it's not ideal. But also we have to figure out cost-effective ways of helping people with mental illness. So ketamine is really a great tool. Again, I say it's not a cure, it's like a catalyst to kind of open up to new potential opportunities in their mind, but it's really like recreating the story. And the other thing is that the therapy really is vital to them having longevity, and that's what we want, is durable changes, right? We want to not start microdosing people on ketamine because they felt great as it was a rapid antidepressant, but then 3 months later they feel bad again. And so sometimes you can, repeat like a booster every, 3 or 6 months, so that you have that. But the point is, the skills that you're learning during the sessions are key to having it not revert back to who you were.
Have you tried ketamine yet, Dr. Weiner?
So I actually have. I actually did a very, very low dose. And to be completely honest, it was we wanted to try a group session. So we wanted to see what, and the reason why is because we're looking for affordable ways of helping people, because there are so many people that are suffering. So we did a group session with many people. We had another physician was there who prescribed it, and we had 2 different sitters, and we had a few people who were participating. Actually, we had 2 other physicians there, and actually one of Len May's friends who introduced us was there.
I'm not gonna mention any names, but I know who it is.
My favorite people. And it was I did a very, very low dose. So I did 75 milligrams of a troche or a lozenge. And usually we do like closer to 200 milligrams for a therapeutic session. And I did that because we were in a group session. I wanted to just kind of feel it. And the reason why is because it's one of those drugs that people really say you can't be a physician or a therapist and understand what they're going through until you've actually felt it a little bit,
Mhm.
which it's similar to cannabis. It's not like I need to take a Percocet before I prescribe a Percocet, but going on this journey, you're having this very profound experience. And actually, I had such a beautiful experience at that low dose that it actually encouraged me to start using low doses during therapy sessions just to kind of open them up. But my session was beautiful. I was, I mean, everything about it was just like love. Like the message that I got was that love is the medicine, which is something that, sounds really ridiculous from a physician, but that's how I felt. Like I saw my two babies, we like everything was just this good, loving feeling that's the way we should, treat each other, be kind to each other, respect each other. But it was kind of, they say the word is ineffable, right? You can't really describe it in words, and I couldn't really describe in words what was happening or where I was, but it just felt like, another dimension. I felt safe, and I just had a very like warm feeling. So everybody has, and I love hearing patients ketamine session experiences. I love to see where they go on their trip and what they see and how they feel. Like I had a patient today, and she said, I felt like I was on top of a mountain, and like the world was right in front of me. I had another guy today, and he was like, you made me into a man. I feel like I felt like a little boy for the past 5 years. So, they're so profound, but then it's what you take with it and carry on into your day so that you don't have to resort back to always doing, these
Yeah.
treatments.
I can add to there's, and just so people realize, there's a big difference between the way I used to do K back in the old rave days. That is not the same way that you would consume it in an intramuscular therapeutic setting. Even the experience itself is completely different. And that set and setting, as Michelle was saying, is super, super important. And having somebody to guide you through that. And like for me, back in the day, it was more of a party drug. You take some K and take some MDMA, and you go out to the clubs, and you have a good time. And I saw some people end up in what's called a K hole, where they're just in their wherever they are in their brain. I luckily, knock on wood, I've never had that happen to me, but there definitely is a complementary, I guess, with cannabis and ketamine. For me personally, what I've seen, there is a definitely complementary benefit to that, because a lot of things that Michelle was mentioning too. You have some areas that create pain of from like cortisol and pH levels going up, and you have your immune system addressing those things. So you have these inflammation and pain. A lot of that comes from that trauma, where anandamide is used to be able to alleviate some of that trauma. And what we've been seeing in some of our studies is people that have different type of genetic predispositions, especially on Fa, which actually degrades anandamide. You can see that those people don't do as well as other people, because they actually need those phytocannabinoids from THC. But anyway, not to go off on a tangent, I just think that it's really, really important to distinguish the two from your, and I know, and I see this right now in LA, still to this day, people are taking ketamine recreationally and microdosing on that. And it's a completely different experience when you have, a therapeutic process. So,
And
so
no,
I'm,
and you're right about that. Like there was a study done where they blocked the CB1 receptor, and ketamine didn't prevent pain, right? So like that even goes to show how much maybe the mechanism of ketamine could potentially even affect your endocannabinoid system and
absolutely.
anandamide levels as well. So that all that stuff is very interesting. Even the concept of epigenetics, the fact that so much is so much can actually change over time, and how can we live well and stop just trying to treat illness. That's really what it is. Like how did we get to this point? And that's what people need to use cannabis more for. Is we know it helps with chronic debilitating conditions, but how can we promote wellness and health prevention and disease prevention and health promotion, and really kind of minimizing the state that we got in again. Like this pandemic is really just like an amplifier for everybody.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, let's dive into you. We want to know more about you and your experiences. So whatever you feel comfortable answering, but we have several questions that we ask our guests, And the first question is, please describe your first experience with cannabis. We already made an assumption that you have consumed cannabis, and if you choose not to speak about that, it's up to you. But your first cannabis experience, what was that like?
I would probably say that was in sleepaway camp, right? So I
Which
was
camp?
it's
Camp
called
Golden Slipper.
Camp Pointel. It's like
Okay.
in Starlight, Pennsylvania. So I'm from New York, and we all go to Pennsylvania for a sleepaway camp. I went for 10 years. I'm a huge sleepaway camp person. I can't wait to send my kids to sleepaway camp.
That's
So, you know,
in the West Coast, we don't do that.
Yeah, we did. My daughter went to JC Shalom for like 4 years in a row, and she loved it. That was
All
her
right,
favorite.
I'm wrong. Well,
and, yeah, no, it was, you know, it was a Jewish sleepaway camp, and you know, from the JCC. And my first, and that's kind of like, that's where I learned a lot about cannabis, because I was always around the older counselors, and they had like their little lounge where they would hang out. And then at night, when I became a counselor, we would go to this place, and it was called either the Elmwood or the Orson. There were these two bars that we would go to at night, and we would, you know, play pool, and then we would make a fire, and everybody would listen to Grateful Dead, and, you know, like the old school music. Van Morrison was a big one. And so I would say the first time I ever tried cannabis was probably in that little place, we would call it like the pit, like the little place that we would all hang out at night. And that's really when I realized, you know, how amazing the plant is. And obviously back then I was, you know, very, very young. I was probably in high school. And now it's just amazing to think back, because I am so glad that I was introduced to it, because then I went to med school, and then I had babies, and, you know, things changed a lot over time. But the first time, I think it was one of those times when I didn't get high, right? Like a lot of people say that the first time you ever try cannabis, that's the time that you'll get most high, because your receptors are, you know, have never been used before by THC. But either I didn't know how to like inhale or whatever it was. But, you know, the first time I didn't get high, but then I tried, I continued to try, and I was able to learn how to inhale properly.
I
But
think
yeah.
Len's theory on this is that we probably just didn't inhale it.
I
Right?
see it all the time. This
People blow it.
would-
They're like,
the-
they blow it. Yeah, they're
let
scared.
and then but you had a positive experience.
Yeah, no, I definitely had a positive experience, because again, think about it. My setting is amazing. I'm at sleepaway camp. I don't have my parents around me. Nobody's gonna bust me. I'm with people who were experienced, and then you know, camp and cannabis just were a thing. You know, like who would rather? I would rather use cannabis in nature, you know, outside, and just kind of connect with everything there. I was in Pennsylvania. We had beautiful skies and stars and music, and, you know, that was like the best years of my life, I would say, sleepaway camp.
Can I
John-
ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So Michelle's experience with having cannabis, a little bit with ketamine, she was talking about this sort of like losing your ego in some way, or like you know, you have a default, right? But this kind of alters that default position. And I feel like in my experience, sometimes that experience of losing my ego or losing that default is a little scary. And I know I'm not alone in that. I think I was reading, who was it? Ashton Kutcher, or maybe it was Ben. And it was Ben Affleck saying like, "Oh, I had ego disassociation," or something. Like he had a term for it that I had never heard before. I was like, "Oh, that might be what I have." But do your patients ever talk about that, and how do you sort of counsel them through that?
Yeah, so like the classic terms are ego dissolution or depersonalization. Depersonalization is like when you completely just lose, like you're outside of your body, but you also lose your ego. Like they you know, like people who, when we talk about DMT and other type of psychedelics, it's kind of like, you know, when you turn into nothingness or oneness, it's kind of like similar, where it's like a paradox, you know, it's like you're kind of all one with nature. And people sometimes describe it like they're stuck in a loop, you know, like they're in this dimension where it's just continuously going on. They don't really know where they are, but at the same time they want. So the important thing again is the preparation. You know, you have to know if you're going to go to that dose today, then you have to be prepared for it. And that dose can be, I've witnessed a lot of my patients. Like I had one woman that I witnessed her, she was literally telling me to tell her husband that she loves him, you know, because she actually thought that maybe
He's
she
gonna
was
die.
dying. She had to like negotiate and come to terms with, do I want to, is it okay? And like, that's the whole point, is that you live your biggest fear. Once you live your biggest fear, then there's nothing really more to fear. And so I think, but ego dissolution is so important, because the problem is once people kind of minimize their ego, then it's hard to be in society with the others who are walking around with their ego, right? So it's something that is extremely important for them to kind of change their default mode, how they view themselves. But once they have gotten to that point where they're outside of their body and they're maybe re-experiencing something that caused them trauma, then they can relive it without the emotion. So later on, let's say you get that same trigger, you hear a loud noise or whatever it is your trigger. Maybe you relive that situation during your ketamine experience, and the emotion isn't associated anymore with that. So it's can be very therapeutic, but it can be very dangerous. And that's dangerous, meaning that I've also seen patients get very scared because they've gotten to that point, even when we've prepared them. And I have to remind them, you're in this recliner, you're in my office, I'm here with you. I hold their hands, maybe we take their eye shades off, to counsel them. But a lot of times with ketamine, it's medically very safe. We just actually have to breathe through it, and calm their anxiety, because some of their biggest fears come up. But again, that ego dissolution that to me is like the highest state you can go.
Yeah, we get cannabis. So, John, I think I know what mistake you made. You didn't go to Pennsylvania in nature during your first experience. Coney Island was.
No, I went to Nathan's in Yonkers.
Yeah, it probably wasn't the best, or Yonkers. Yeah, it probably wasn't the best setting for your experience.
The worst.
Well, you kind of already mentioned this, Michelle, music wise, but we're big music guys. So is there a genre of music or an album or something that is kind of your go-to that you like to listen to?
It's funny. I should have prepared myself knowing who you are, that I was going to get these questions. But I'm a huge Dave Matthews fan. That's my thing. Like I love Dave. I know it's like kind of like old school, but that was my time. Like I love Dave. I think that he's great live. I love his music. I love who he plays with. So I'm a huge Dave person. I like old school stuff. Like Van Morrison, Steve Miller Band. That kind of stuff. That was like definitely from growing up. But now I've kind of like, I'm open to everything. Like sometimes I'll listen to country, like I'll listen to Zach Brown Band, or some more like pop stuff. But the thing is, I have two kids, so half the time I'm listening to like Justin Bieber. That's what I have to play in my car, and then I end up learning it and kind of liking it. And now I kind of listen to a little bit of everything because of that.
Yeah, so Bieber is a funny one, because my daughter's 16, but Bieber is our absolute number one favorite still to this day. And she was little, I think maybe 8 or so, but she wanted to go to the Justin Bieber concert. And I was like, okay, I'll go to Justin Bieber concert with you. But first, we're going to go see a real concert. So I took her to Jane's Addiction and Alice in Chains. It was her first concert. She saw that, and she got a pic from one of the guys there, and Dave Navarro blew her a kiss. And then we got to see Bieber. And we actually saw Bieber on the street and with a bunch of bodyguards. And honestly, there was people like chasing like the Beatles. I see a lot of celebrities and musicians in LA, but I've never seen anybody react to a celebrity like they did to Bieber. There was like literally little girls chasing him. He had to get security, get him in a car, and so you could drive away. So my daughter didn't get a chance to really meet him.
Oh,
I was going to take my 7-year-old daughter to Harry Styles.
I was going to say that's the new Bieber.
Yeah, that's the new. And so that one, but then the pandemic, and we, it got postponed, probably get postponed again. But it's just funny, like with the kids, because I'll try to expose them to some of my music when they're in the car, just to kind of see if they would just go into that zone. Like sometimes I'll listen to Pink, and it's kind of like it gets them like a little bit excited, motivated, but then she has some more like emotional songs. So I like to expose them to a little bit of everything, just to, because I know when I was young, like my parents listened to like Frank Sinatra and, Barbra Streisand, like all those old school, but now I'm so glad that I learned some of that.
Yeah, for sure. I have a pretty significant album collection. My dad had one, and I wasn't able to touch any albums. Couldn't touch anything. For me, I'm like, here we go. I got a record player. I have record players in like 4 different rooms in my house. I'm like, here's all my records. Go take anything. Nope, not interested. Spotify playlist. These are my favorites. I care less about that stuff. But she does listen. Like I exposed her early on to Pink Floyd and Zappa and all that stuff. So she does listen once in a while. So she has more eclectic taste than her friends, but there was a lot of Travis Scott that's being played in our house. Just tell you. All right. So what has cannabis meant in your life?
That's a good question. So really cannabis has been like an absolute savior on so many levels. And the reason why is because from a career standpoint, I was feeling actually very stuck because I was an interventional pain doctor doing injections, and I didn't want to do injections anymore because I just wanted to help the patient from kind of like the inside out. I didn't want to do like band-aids all day long. And again, like when you have an epidural and you have a disc herniation and you get better, great. And that I love that stuff too. But I felt like there was just so much chronic pain, and so for me, honestly, it was a huge savior because I actually felt stuck in my career. I felt like I was going to continue down this path of doing injections and prescribing opioids and not being satisfied, not feeling like, my biggest part of my day, all the hours spent in my day was actually helping people. And that's really what I wanted to do. So I'm so grateful that I lived in this time when cannabis is legal in Florida, and that it was just the perfect time for me. Like I got it at the right time, and I was open to it, and I was in the right private practice, not at a university. So it's been a huge savior for me in terms of changing my career. And then learning so much about the endocannabinoid system has helped me just live a healthier life, right? Like I learn about, exercising, increasing our endogenous cannabinoids, and eating healthy. And as much as I learn and teach to patients, then I have to do it myself. So there's a huge component of connection, and that's a really big part of, I think, living a meaningful life, right? Like a lot of times we are living, but are we finding meaning in our life? And probably the patient that sticks out the most to me is a guy that was my first cannabis patient that had vertebral fractures. And at the time I had done, his kyphoplasty, which is a procedure that I would never do now because I'm so inexperienced. And, I helped him with his pain, and then he developed cancer, and his daughter was unbelievable. And all throughout palliative care, all throughout his hospice, we didn't use any opioids. We didn't use any benzos. We just used cannabis in this man. And so like, there's so many stories where I was able to really impact patients' lives and understand how they're using it at the end of their life to find meaning, or during their life when they feel like they're stuck, and just having that outlet, having that alternative, helping people when other people can't. Like I don't even mind those challenges, and I don't even mind if you come to me and it's your last resort, because then once you feel better, you'll offer to a patient, or a friend or a family member earlier on. So it's really I'm so thankful for cannabis because it has opened my career up, but it also taught me so much about how to live a healthy, meaningful life that now I loved speaking about it so I could encourage other people. And I think it's also, empowering the patient or empowering the person to kind of stop being so lazy and waiting for the physician to fix your issues, right? Waiting for healthcare to fix it. It's like it's your life. If you want to find meaning in your life, then you need to be a little bit productive, and you need to and people think, well, I want how many milligrams of this do I take, and I don't want to be high. This is personalized medicine. You're going to have to open your mouth and put it in your mouth, and then tell me in an hour how you feel. And if you do get high, I'll teach you ways of minimizing that, but you have to at least open your mouth. Like the patients are like, and that's why like the FDA will have such a hard time regulating cannabis. You can't just say anyone who has neuropathic pain, here's 10 milligrams of a 1-to-1. It's not going to work like that. You've been smoking cannabis for 40 years, or you've never tried it at all. You have no idea your sensitivity. So I'm unbelievably grateful for cannabis. It's really changed me as a person. It's changed my career, and even like opened my parents. My parents, they wonder how like things have evolved with me, obviously. And now I have an office in Boca because my parents live in Boca, and there's so many patients and friends of theirs that I'm able to help. So it's my dad obviously wants to know more about the cannabis stocks and not really about cannabis, but the whole industry is affecting my family's life. Even my 7-year-old, when I became the chair of the Florida Medical Marijuana Advisory Committee, I was very excited about it, and she was in the back seat, and my daughter was like, "Oh, marijuana," and I'm like, "Wow, you're 6 years old at the time, and you said marijuana." So I teach my kids about it. I teach them about CBD, about cannabis, and about why people use it, so that they can relax, so that they can feel better, so that they can sleep, they have less pain. So it's really, it is a huge part of my life, even my family's life.
Yeah, I so appreciate what you said, and living it. There's such hypocrisy. I'll just tell one quick story. There's a doctor who's a very well known cannabis doctor in California. I'm obviously not going to mention name, but he recommends cannabis and talks about it as an expert and talks about the endocannabinoid system. He's severely overweight and smokes cigarettes nonstop. And it was like, well, if you're gonna recommend somebody, plant medicine and a way to balance their endocannabinoid system, maybe you should live that life yourself and use that, be the example for your patients. So I really really appreciate you saying that's really important. All right, so last question, kind of fun. Maybe you remember, maybe not. We have mixed results from this one. This is not John's favorite question, but I still like to ask it. If you remember, please describe what your room looked like growing up.
She likes the question.
That's such a that's so funny. That's a good question. So I don't know if you remember the show Full House, but I had
Never.
the same comforter that DJ Tanner had. It was like the white comforter with the red boxes and yellow or whatever. So that's like when I think back. So I lived on Long Island, and my room was over the garage, and we had a basketball net against the garage. So whenever my sister or my brother would play, like they would always be banging it against my room. But my room was, it had a desk, it was all white, and then I had DJ Tanner's comforter in it. And it's funny because at the time my mom's an interior designer, so I had all these like built-in things, like the built-in with the drawer, the pull out, underneath the bed, and she was really into all that stuff. But it's funny because now I think about my daughter's room, and I'm such a what you see is what you get type of person, like I'm like less is more, right? So like I think about my room, and it had all these built-ins and these cabinets and the desk and whatever, and like my little girl, like I could probably step it up a little bit. But yeah,
That's so funny.
that was my room. We had carpet because we were on Long Island.
That's
Good
cool.
question. I like that.
Um, where can people find out more about you? Social media, website? I mean, this has been terrific. It's so grateful for you coming on. I just want everybody to learn more about what you do and engage with you. Where can people find you?
So my website's drmichelleweiner.com. My Instagram's the same thing, Dr. Michelle Weiner. And I'm in South Florida. I have offices in Miami, Hollywood, and Boca. And I'm really excited for the future. Like we always talk about the terpenes and the entourage effect and cannabis. And I think that ketamine is going to offer a lot for the future as well. And there's going to be much more that comes out. And the good thing is that with the evidence, we'll be able to kind of get rid of the stigma. And so I think we're getting closer to that. And the more we talk about this, you see how many like-minded people we run into, and the anecdotes are, speak for itself. So thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed talking to you guys.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks, Michelle. I want her to be my doctor.
Right?
Do you have a
awesome,
doctor like that in California? We'll talk
right?
offline.
Yeah, I mean, I belong to an integrated medical practice, in which I pay monthly fee, and they're very very open. We haven't started talking about ketamine yet, but I definitely have doctors that work with ketamine. And look, Michelle hit the nail on the head. All these different things that we consume, they're all interconnected, and they all go back to your modulating system. Pain is a result of, anxiety is a result of. So if you follow the path, it's all connected. And there's a mind body connection. I mean, Dr. John Sarno made a career of that. He wrote The Mind Body Connection and Healing Back Pain. And he talked about, when you think and you have stress, it's related to pain. And we carry our pain in different parts of our body, depending what that is. But there is a correlation between stress, between cortisol levels, between acidity, your pH level raising in your body, and your immune response to that pH level. So acid, immune response, inflammation creates pain. Pain goes in, you feel in pain. Where is the pain? The pain is in my ankle. You get a shot in your ankle and it feels better because you block the receptor from that transmission back to the brain, but you haven't done anything. You never
Right.
follow why are you
Not
getting
holistic.
the
Yeah.
pain in the first place? Well, the pain comes from the stress that I have to go on vacation next week, and my wife is telling me that the room is not going to be good enough, the seat's not going to be. So I'm stressed, and it's creating that stress level increase. And because I have a predisposition to stress reactivity and to PTSD, it's playing that movie in my head over and over, and I'm not producing enough anandamide, which is my bliss hormone, which is my endogenous endocannabinoid, to be able to regulate that. So all these things are connected. And when somebody really looks at the body in that way, the body and mind, that's really what physicians should be doing across the board.
Yeah. They
with the
just treat
exception
the
of
problem.
surgeons. With
Yeah.
the exception of surgeons. Surgeons are precision people. They go in and they cut something out, they remove, but everybody else needs to look at the entire body. And that's the
Yeah.
issue that they don't.
And also at wellness, you don't go to the doctor for wellness often. You go to the doctor when you're very sick. And so they're treating a problem instead of kind of like treating it.
Exactly.
But
Yeah,
anyway, so it's
preventative.
always great to talk to doctors like that who are more enlightened and open. I have a lot of doctors in my family from Long Island who are not really necessarily the same way. So
I do it all so here's
encouraging.
an example. So I posted I was on somebody's podcast or somebody's interview. Yeah, I think it was a podcast, and the person posted on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden there's a lot of comments. Great, I'm glad you're talking about this genetics. And there's a doctor who posts this comment saying, I want to caution everybody about genetics. There are no clinical trials. There's no double-blind placebos. So be careful. These claims, and it goes on and on and on.
Hmm.
And it's just like, okay, can you please show me where we make claims? Number two, there are over 16,000 publications in PubMed alone about cannabis. There is research. Are there a lot of double-blind placebo clinical trials? Absolutely not. There is
And we
many
explain
reasons
why.
why, many reasons why. But come on, man. It's what Michelle said, being curious and being open-minded and actually saying to yourself, I want to help people. So whatever I learned in school, if you went to medical school prior to 1992, you didn't even know there was an endocannabinoid system because it was just discovered in 1992. So there are new discoveries made all the
Right.
time. How, as a physician, as a healthcare professional, you have to take CME, continuing ed. How are you not curious between that 1 year? There's so many things that happen every single day. You go back to your books a year later and you're going to go and you say, oh, okay, this is something new, but I don't give a shit. I'm just going to keep doing my own thing. Or are you going to say, what can I do to help my patients open my mind up and ingest as much information as possible? And you're right. That's the doctor that you want to go to.
Yeah.
So
And
doctors against it. No.
she's open to new things. And again, she's talking about personalized medicine. I really like that too, where it's like,
Yeah.
she's not going to make some generic thing where you have to take a 3 to 1 because, it's going to be personalized to your experience. And how many doctors personalize your medicine? No, they just kind of say you should be on this drug and this
How many
dose. They don't
doctors even
explain.
know?
Yeah.
Doctors don't know. You know what they count? Like, and I'm not painting everybody with a broad brush. A lot of doctors do know, but a lot of doctors do this. They go and they say, okay, whatever opioid or whatever Percocet, as Michelle was saying, here it is. How much do you take? Well, it's the same dose that you take for talk to your pharmacist. So your pharmacist, the doctors rely on the PharmD and the pharmacist to be able to better understand the medication. And the doctors rarely look and see what other medications is this person consuming, that medication can interact with the other medication and cause a reaction. So a lot of them are lazy enough where, they write a quick prescription and they say the PharmD will take care of it during your consultation with them. And that's
Right.
really not the way to be able to.
Damn it. All right. Well,
Our last thing on this. So in speaking of clinical trials, so a few years back, I was asked by a university that was associated with a hospital to participate in an autism study. They asked if I can find CBDV. And I went out. It's a very difficult cannabinoid to isolate, but I was able to isolate it. They need a chain of custody, all that stuff. And I was able to find it, and it came back to the study, and they said, we can't use it. I said, why? Said, well, because the Department of Defense is sponsoring the study.
Hmm.
That's interesting. I thought it was a Schedule 1. What do you mean? It's Department of Defense. Yeah. And they have a contract with GW Pharmaceuticals. So GW Pharmaceutical is the only one that could have provided that isolated molecule for the study. So even if you have studies, you have to see where the relationship is. Big pharma definitely has a big role in this still, and with the isolated molecules. All right.
Interesting.
All right. I have a theory. I want to talk to you about this theory.
Yes.
Okay. So this theory is, I was listening to, I think it was LL. There's and some old school hip hop. There's shout outs to DJs, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of hip hop who shouts out the DJ. It started with the DJ, and the MC comes on, and he's like, my DJ, like Eric B for president.
Right.
And I think now when I listen to music now, because it's all studio produced, it's missing that element of that DJ and an MC. Like, all the music is already produced. They don't have that DJ.
Yeah, you don't have that experience anymore. Some being on the turntables playing it. Yeah, it's different. It's producers. The DJs have become producers, and it's a different dynamic.
Yeah, but that shout out, like, okay. So I want to talk to you about some of the DJs that you think we can do a list or whatever. I wrote some down. And
we're talking about hip hop DJs specifically.
I'm sorry. Yes. Hip hop DJs. So you're absolutely right, because there are DJ Khaled, who is a producer, right?
Right.
Scott Storch, who's a producer, kind of like a DJ producer, because he gets shouted out in the songs as well. So they're making a contribution. So there's a collaboration. But a lot of them, they don't. They just buy tracks from other people like Hit Boy, etc., and they play. So I think it changed hip hop music without having this DJ present. So wanted to see if we can go through a list maybe of
let's do it. I jotted down some ideas after you.
I jotted down some too.
After you texted me about that, and I've got my feeling on this as a amateur hip hop, or maybe not even so amateur, since I actually have been paid
you're
to
a professional DJ.
I've actually been paid to DJ.
By the way, I've been paid to DJ too. I used to work for Fascinating Rhythm Disc Jockeys in Philadelphia for a while.
Oh, that's awesome.
So bar mitzvahs and all that.
I did that too. We have like parallel lives. So I DJ'd. I had a company called The Chill Factor, and we DJ'd dances. In fact, do I have my card still? At one point, I had my business card that I found in it was like this gold business card that says The Chill Factor, DJ Kid Finesse, which is just so funny. But and as I got older, I DJ'd in New York, and never like made a living doing it, but certainly got paid. But bar mitzvahs and weddings were where it was at.
Yeah. I mean, I love DJs, like DJs in the DJ culture. I'm not talking about hip hop in general, because like DJ Karaoke, all the house music DJs and all those guys, they're amazing. But I want to focus our conversation just strictly on that guy, like
the hip hop,
Kool Herc, and whoever comes up and MCs over that. That's what I want to focus on. So,
right.
Do you want to go? You want me to kind of?
Well, you mentioned Kool Herc. I think you have to start with Kool Herc, right? You start with the original hip hop DJ. So we've talked about Kool Herc on the show.
Yes. Early
70s, the Bronx, South Bronx, and he brought a kind of sound. He figured out how to play breaks back to back, and didn't really do the mixing so much, and certainly didn't do the scratching, but just played these break beats from popular records, and he was imitating what he had heard growing up in Jamaica in sound systems, to give credit to the sound systems from Jamaica.
Right.
And so he's the first to bring it to America as far as anybody's concerned. There's some other
Yeah.
talk about maybe DJ Kaz and all those guys.
Yeah, I would say you're right about Cool Herc, and the person who really brought it to the breakbeat model was Grandmaster Flash.
Right.
Like he
Made
took
it a
that
science.
and made it into a science. I saw that you probably saw the same where he draws the crayon on the album, and he's like,
Right.
"That's where the beat is." And
That's where,
you-"
yes, that's where you spin it back. Yes, I used to do that. And so he found, and he figured out, him and Grandmaster Kaz are credited with figuring out scratching as well.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So
So those are the guys that created like
pioneers.
that's the pioneers. But from there, it was the people who created groups, right? So
Right.
for me, it's like Jam Master Jay
Yep.
would be the next iteration of that.
Yep, I agree. Jam Master Jay, yes, because he's very early hip hop. He created groups and he was making those beats for Run DMC. And also a guy that I really liked when I was younger that turned out to be very influential, just like on the streets before he made records, was Africa Bambaataa.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
he had
on the list. for
yeah,
sure.
he was doing a lot of street parties and but also kind of brought that sound of like electro hip hop to the forefront, where he was finding like break beats from like Kraftwerk. It's amazing
Yeah.
how influential Kraftwerk was in early hip hop and in DJing, like this weird obscure German synth band.
I know.
Like
a lot of music.
influence like all their music, like all those beats from like Planet Rock. And if you listen to all this, it's all from Germany. So
I
yeah,
wonder how they found that. You have to be like really digging.
you have to be digging deep, right? It's crazy.
Yeah. So some of the other ones I have, and by the way, throw them out too
Yeah.
if you have any. But I have, and these are like my favorites. So I already mentioned Eric B
Mhm.
for sure,
For
and
sure.
then Terminator X.
Yep. Amazing.
Public Enemy.
He is the Public Enemy. I would even go before we even get to Terminator X. I feel like there's a few early guys that I was thinking about, and some you might be familiar with, and some you might not be. Well, first of all, it's interesting that you didn't mention Jazzy Jeff. I don't. He might be on your list.
Okay,
Okay.
Jazzy Jeff is on my list. I just
All right. So pre Terminator X, there's these guys. Okay, so there was this guy Davey DMX who has a record called Davey D. You are the best. Rock this beat because it is so fresh. There's a few guys that came out with records that was just them DJing in the sort of early 80s, and I had those records and they meant a huge amount to me, and I think any hip hop DJ that was alive during that time. And one of this guy was named Davey DMX, who I believe was the DJ of Curtis Blow. And then another guy's this guy AJ, who did this record called AJ Scratch, and we'll play you a little sample of that.
I know that. I know that.
No, AJ, I want
Yep.
to see you. So those were like really early, just
Rick
DJ
Rubin
records.
talks about that. I listened to one of his pods that he did, and he talked about
AJ, yeah. And I feel like because Grandmaster Flash did that record, The Adventures of Grandmaster Flash and the Wheels of Steel, which he did completely live, which is him just scratching and DJing.
Mhm.
And then a few other artists kind of followed up with like their own. And then,
Yeah.
You're right. Like Jazzy Jeff did one, Eric B did one of those. You had to sort of do that back in the day. If you were,
Yeah.
Terminator X has one that's just like him doing his thing, right?
Yep.
I love those records so much.
Yeah,
They don't do those
constant
anymore.
scratches. No, they
Yeah.
don't do that anymore. And then
No.
you have, and then the one that came to mind when I was listening to Cut Creator.
Yep.
What my DJ name? Cut Creator.
Cut
I was like,
Creator, right.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So all these guys were all inventing like DJing and reinventing it and coming up with new beats. And I feel like Jam Master Jay was sort of the beginning of the producer DJ,
Yeah,
right?
it's like the
that
DJ
was-
Premier, Marley
Yep.
Marl, like those guys.
Yeah,
were the
became
next
Premier.
generation. I
Right.
think of those, right?
Then there was like, well, see, I don't know how familiar, because you grew up in Philly, and I don't know if this
Right.
was, but there was a whole generation of DJs on the radio that were hip hop DJs that, at least when I was growing up in New York in the mid 80s,
Like Stretch and Babito,
well, there was guys like DJ Red Alert.
yeah, of course.
And Chuck Chill Out. And I think that their
Yeah.
shows were syndicated, but they were coming out of New York radio stations and they only played on Friday and Saturday nights. And that was the only place, if you didn't live like, in the South Bronx, where you could hear hip hop. And it was the only radio stations weren't playing it during the day. So you had to stay there with your like finger on the record and pause button to record hip hop. It was the only place to hear it. for me. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
so big shout out to DJ Red Alert. And you can
Absolutely.
find all these shows on YouTube, and it's so fun to listen to them. And DJ
Yeah,
Chuck Chill Out was the other
yeah,
guy.
DJ Red
Mr.
Alert
Magic.
was big. Mr. Magic, yep.
Yep.
I
Yeah. So
think
all those
Biggie,
guys.
doesn't Biggie talk
This
about
Biggie
that?
loves Mr. Magic. Mr. Magic was a
Marley Marl, yeah, Mr.
big pain in the
Magic.
ass. Well, he was Marley Marl. Marley Marl was Mr. Magic's DJ.
Yeah,
Mr. Magic was like the guy who talked like this, man.
yeah,
You know, and then you had Marley Marl, who was the DJ, and then he went
Yeah.
on to become a really good producer. So
yeah. So you had those
that
guys.
was like
You
early
had
80s.
yeah, DJ. You had Premier.
Yeah.
Then you had
love.
Kid Capri. I would
Huge.
say
Yeah.
right.
You said Eric B. You
Let
know,
me let me. What do you think about Pete Rock? Like because it was Pete Rock and CL Smooth. Do you consider Pete Rock as a DJ? or do
people
you
think Pete Rock is a DJ, and it's interesting. My son just brought up Pete Rock the other day. I guess he's got a new record out. He's still doing his thing, Pete Rock. He's like Premier, like he's just never died.
right.
And that song "Reminisce" with CL Smooth and
Oh,
Pete
yeah.
Rock.
Yep.
I mean, give me a break. It's like one of the greatest rap records ever made.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think he's the real deal. I don't know how much producing he does versus DJing. And you're right. Like once they put a ban on using samples and you had to pay all this money, that kind of put a dent in what DJs could do. They couldn't just sit there anymore and like play, James Brown records and old school records. They weren't allowed to do that anymore. So they had to become producers and make their own
Right.
beats and their own sound. So it kind of changed the whole deal. But yes, Pete Rock was great in both eras when you could play the break beats and not get sued, and then when you had to remake new beats.
Right. And so I think that the next generation from there, and I probably am skipping people, but we can go back to that, is the era of like Dr. Dre. Because Dr. Dre was like, okay, he's a DJ, but he's a contributor. He's also obviously
rapper,
rapping, producer, all that stuff. It was like the multi-talent, and that's I think, and I don't know this for a fact, but I think this is where Khalid and Scott Storch, a lot of these guys got their influence from the stuff that Dre was doing.
For sure, Dre was doing it. Even Q-Tip was making his own beats, right, and producing.
I was going to ask you about what you felt about Q-Tip. Is that because
I've seen him DJ too? He DJs. Yeah. It's like you don't think of it because he had his own DJ in Tribe Called Quest, but he also DJs. Like I've seen him like on the turntables doing his
I've seen the Beastie Boys DJ too. So
yeah,
I wouldn't consider them DJs. Mike D, but I wouldn't consider it.
I know, it's funny. I guess everybody kind of does it. But I agree. I think those guys are huge influence. And you mentioned the Beastie Boys. One of my favorite DJs ever is Mixmaster Mike.
Mixmaster Mike, of course. It's Hurricane and Mixmaster Mike.
Right. Yeah, I love. And one time I heard Mixmaster Mike. I went to a show, and I'm sure you probably went to the show back in the day too. I think the Beastie Boys did an intergalactic. It was it was a Hello Nasty tour.
Yeah.
And where Intergalactic was on that record. But anyway, Mixmaster Mike did this mix that I've never forgotten, where he mixed Rush's Tom Sawyer. It was the first time I'd ever really heard a DJ mix like scratch stuff that wasn't hip hop, like was actually taking rock breaks and like making them into and it was just like at the time it was like revolutionary. I remember sitting there in like wherever that place is in New Jersey, and I was like, holy F, this is like the best thing I've ever heard in my life. He was playing the beginning of Tom Sawyer, like ding, 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 ding. Yeah.
I've heard him do shows before where he comes in and as the opening act for somebody else who's an MC, and he does his whole DJ show. And I've seen him do that in Hollywood a couple of times. Yeah,
he's the best.
Michael Schwartz, by the way.
Oh, he is. See, I thought Mixmaster Mike was a Latin. I didn't realize that he was a fellow Tribe member.
Just saying.
That's pretty cool. Have you ever heard that that voicemail where he calls the Beastie Boys up and he's trying to get them to put them on his record, and they have a whole like voicemail of him saying like, "Yeah, my name is Mike, and I'd love to be on your record." I don't know. It's pretty.
Sounds familiar. I don't.
Yeah, I feel like it might be on one of their records. I have to find that.
And then Muggs. I would throw Muggs in there. Because he did a lot of work with a lot of those bands like Funk Dubious, besides Cypress Hill, all those other bands.
And because we love Cypress Hill, and big up to Be Real.
Be Real.
Who will always be a legend in our minds.
Always, yeah. That was, I'm still like, we
Like
just
shaking
posted
from.
yeah, it's just incredible feedback. I am just
Yeah,
so
and
excited.
Muggs is the best. Yep.
And then what about Spinderella?
I know. I was thinking we got to put some female DJs up in this. I mean, Spinderella might have been the first, like one of the first female DJs, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she's like early. There's Jazzy Joyce, I think there was a woman name, but yeah, Spinderella, man. I mean,
I don't know who else is
she
there.
had
Are
a
there?
and she had her own Spinderella song. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's not been that has been it's been quite misogynistic, the DJ field, and in fact, I just did a podcast I mentioned before about, and I haven't posted it yet, but about the history of the DJ, and it was hard. We were hard pressed to find women DJs to celebrate. There's a few that are out now. Apparently, this guy was telling me there's a few like kind of like Dutch female DJs that are tearing it up. And
Are
like
they hip
really,
hop DJs or are they
they're not
just
hip hop. So
yeah?
but yeah, a female hip hop DJ. I mean, it's not. There's not many.
Is MC Light a DJ
I mean,
too?
she wasn't a DJ. She
No,
had a
not
DJ.
really, right?
Yeah, she had a DJ.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know.
it
I
was
don't know of anybody.
it was a burning hole in the. And why is that? Why are women not on the turntables?
Or maybe we just don't know. This is so.
I think we
everybody
would
out
know. I mean, I feel like Queen Latifah didn't have a female DJ.
No,
I mean, did
no.
she?
Not that I remember. Nobody that you would know. I mean, I think
would know.
Jazzy Joyce is the only one that besides Spinderella that I ever heard of.
I know. It's really.
So
I mean,
if anybody
it's a
out there
tragedy.
knows, if anybody out there knows female DJs and it's specifically in
from hip hop now and from back in the day, like I feel like besides, like you're saying, Jazzy Joyce and Latifah, I can't think of one other
yeah,
female DJ.
somebody told me DJ Rap, and I think I remember I even had like some sort of CD from DJ Rap, but I don't remember the music. To be honest with you, that's the
interesting. That why would that be that there weren't female DJs back?
I've seen Erykah Badu DJ. Does that count?
I love Erykah Badu. Mazzy Star DJ'd. No, I don't know. I mean, I feel like Erykah Badu is an R&B artist. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could DJ. You could technically get on the. I mean, my wife always tells a story about how she one time stumbled into a New Year's Eve party and Lou Reed was DJing. Like, well, she wasn't invited to this party; was just in the wrong apartment, right. And she said Lou Reed was DJing. That was like almost. So I mean, everybody DJs, right? Yeah. That's one of the problems of being a DJ is that everybody can do it. So you can't be like, I'm a DJ. You'll be like, dude.
Well, yeah, it's like Paris Hilton is a DJ.
Yeah, that's annoying.
Oh yeah, I'm laughing at, but apparently she's like a real popular DJ.
I mean, does she know how to DJ?
Well, do you need to know how to DJ nowadays?
The thing is, I guess you don't know now anymore. But I mean, I was pretty purist. Like I know how to mix. I know how to beat match. I knew how to cut and scratch. I doubt. I mean, listen,
you had your technique 1200s. You had your techniques.
I had my techniques. They're actually sitting here to my side. I had all that stuff. I used to lug my records around. But anyway, I was serious about learning how to mix. I know that now people don't even know how to do that. And of course, the technology now makes it a lot easier to do that. It matches the beats for you and does a lot of stuff. But yeah, to me, in order to be a real DJ, you have to know how to do that stuff.
Well, I think
you have to have a technical.
You should record yourself like a little YouTube video and show people what is the basics of DJing, because I think that with all the vinyl is big again. I think people are going to start going back to the old school and really learning how to match beats. You know, it's a
lost art
for sure.
I was never very good at it, even though I spent hours and hours and hours and hours practicing. I used to be so jealous when I would listen on the radio. I'd be like, "How are they doing that? How are they getting it so perfect?"
I know. I did the same thing. I love the practice though. It was so much fun.
Oh, it's fun.
To play records, but yeah, I was never that good at it either. So, all right. I have you heard?
Okay, let's do have you heard? Have you heard?
Yeah. And I want to talk about this. So, by the way, what shirt are you wearing? My ADD.
You know what? I'm wearing my Sugar Hill. I think I've worn this before. I've really got to update my shirts. This is a crisis almost situation. You've got your Maiden on.
I may have wore this before.
Yeah.
Too,
I mean, I feel like with quarantine, I can't just run out and buy like cool shirts like I used to anymore. So now I got a cool DJ shirt. I gotta find shirts. In fact, I've got some ideas for shirts I want to order.
Yeah, you can order them online
based on my my interests. And this gives me a reason, because now I'm actually being held publicly accountable for having terrible shirts.
I just love maiden shirts because I think they're just so in your face. Like people,
And also
get
it
offended.
I see that and I immediately am back to like 5th grade or whatever, 7th grade. Like everybody used to wear those shirts back in
Hey,
the
you
day.
got Eddie. I mean, like
Yeah.
how I walk around with a maiden shirt. I have a couple of them, but you walk around and either people are like, they look at you weird, like, oh, look at this guy, he's got like a skull in it, or people are like, yeah, man, and throw you the rock horns. And I love
You know what
these
nobody
shirts.
ever wears anymore that were so popular when we were growing up, with those shirts like Iron Maiden, but they would be like the baseball with the colored
Oh, yeah.
sleeves,
Yeah,
right? And they would always have the concerts on the back, like, you know,
I have a bunch of
the
those.
Iron Maiden tour, and it would be
They're the-
like, you know,
it's the-
Chicago.
It's the 3/4 sleeve ones.
Yeah,
I
the
have a couple of
3/4
those.
sleeves. I had a police one for a while. I mean, yeah, we got to bring those back. If I had probably hung on to those, it'd probably be worth a pretty
Oh,
penny.
you got to see what they're selling these shirts for now. It's crazy. So I have a shirt before I got divorced and I left a whole bunch of my stuff in the old house. I used to have this shirt. I may have talked about this. I don't remember if I did. Like I'm repeating myself, but there's a band called Citizen Dick. You familiar with Citizen Dick?
I'm not, but it sounds like
Right.
the story of my life.
So Citizen Dick is a Cameron Crowe derived band. It's from the movie called Singles. So
Okay.
Singles was the movie about like a band in Seattle, and it's a love story. But
Right.
they made this band with guys from Pearl Jam, and there was some Alice in Chains guys, and the lead singer is Matt Dillon.
Oh, nice.
And it's a made up band, but it was like a real band for the movie. I had a shirt. And I was like, yeah, it's cool. Citizen Dick. And nobody knows. And I lost that shirt, whatever I gave it. I went to replace it. I went on eBay. It was $300.
Holy shit.
I went $300 for it. I'm like, fuck.
Damn it. Could you, and it's like at that point, you probably were like, this got some sweat stains. I'm throwing this away. And you're like, who knew? I mean, when I went to Japan, they were selling like shirts that I remember from the 90s. They were selling, it was incredible what you get at vintage stores just for like stuff that was, but it had to be from the 90s. And that just made me crazy. There were so many things that I owned in the 90s. I should have kept onto my rollerblades, for crying out loud.
There somewhere. I skates are back in. I skate.
Yeah, I've seen some people
skates.
wearing. Yeah. All right.
So
You want to do have you heard?
Yeah, I'm gonna do Have You Heard? I really struggled with which song from this artist to share because there's two that I like a lot, but this is my new favorite hip hop artist, and I'm just gonna share. But it's interesting. I'll just leave it at that and get your opinion before I set it up in any way. Hopefully, I'll do this correctly. All right, ready?
OS, look. I eat beats, watch me dining, shining. I illuminate the rooms that I'm in, timing. Low-key ain't more crucial than alignment. That's why the flow is intertwined with both and I'm defiling every beat I'm on, even though I know it's wrong to treat rappers like a napkin after I pissed on commodes. Then I wipe us on the toilet, can't decipher if you know that my life is tied to giving hoodlums life despite the hoes that their sights are fixed upon to give them pipe out of control. But the plight we abide in has almost wiped our frontal lobe of our heritage. Rare kids like me who grew up savage, they got embarrassed when they went to their partner crib and seen they mattress had a bed frame. Shout out to those who told me Tobit was a pet name. Tobit Chuku Dubem Weekwe is my correct name. Praise God for follies of my colleagues that embody everything I overcame, blowing that ganji to suppress pain. Oh.
All right.
That's dope. I like that.
So the guy's name is Toby Owigwe. I may have butchered his name, but he said in the song what his full name is. He's a Houston guy. I heard a couple of songs, then I dove deep into his catalog. Apparently, he's got a shitload of songs. He's got this amazing song with Black Thought from The Roots and Royce the 5'9", who I think I played once. He did an Eminem song. It's called Father Figure. It is what hip hop should be. And I probably should have played that, but the reason why I didn't want to play that is because we only get snippets and you wouldn't hear all.
Right. That's the problem.
You got to hear Black Thought on that song, I mean, that is true hip hop. It doesn't matter what the beats are. The beats are cool, but it's all about. And for those of you who can't see the video, every single one of Tobey's songs, he plays all the lyrics. All the lyrics to everything he says are flashed on the screen during the video, so you can actually go along and read. Because a lot of this hip hop today, I don't understand what they're saying. Like I
Right.
can't. It's all auto
Yeah,
tune.
you can hear it. You can see it.
Every single word you can see.
He
And there's a lot of poetry.
articulates.
Yeah, articulates.
Yeah,
And
he's good.
He's an interesting looking guy. That Houston, shout out to Houston. There's not been a lot of that I'm familiar with. A lot of hip hop acts besides the Ghetto Boys. I'm not even sure that I know much Texas hip hop, but Toby, Wigway,
Shout out.
guy. Shout. Yep.
I might not have the right song here queued up. I keep trying to do it right, and then I forget to ask my son what the name of the Secdam record was that he played me, which was so good. But let me just see if this is the right one. Can you hear that? I hope not.
No.
Oh, good. It's good that you can't hear that. No, it's the wrong song. All right.
I love this process. Do you want me to play the other? 2 seconds of the other.
Someday
Tobey
I am
song?
going to get it right with my Jedi Mind Tricks record, which I really, really want to play you
All right.
because they're just the best. But I don't have it right. Hold on. Let me just see if this is the song.
All right, go ahead. I'm not listening yet.
Yep, I found it.
All
I
right,
found my song.
All right, never mind. Stop share.
All right. Now it's my turn.
Yes.
Damn you. You always get to go first.
I don't have to go first. You can go
No,
first.
I'm just kidding. All right. So here we go. I'm sharing now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Christian. No, they're no longer Christian. They no longer follow Jesus. They follow the devil 100%.
Sing, bitch. Young. If I don't have a mag, I get a bastard stab with a knife big as a claw from an Alaskan crab. Young, I'm down with Vinny, give me 6 weeks. All your little pip squeaks up shit's creek. Think we a joke? I put 3 in your throat. Drunk off gin and CNC coke, then we flee in a boat. Then I come open up the spot with coconut syrup, so the hoes will suck some cock. Then I forget to call after I know I get attention deficit disorder. 1-5, catch us off X's and dust. Whole clique of registered sex offenders. Pop shit, we'll hold your funeral. XVs, niggas money coming Roman noon.
All right. So that might be the first
I really
rap
like
record.
It.
I think that might be the first rap record I've ever heard that samples a klezmer. It sounds like a Jewish klezmer song, which I thought was really creative. I was like, man, how did I not think of that first?
So there's a song, and I actually want to talk to you about this, and maybe in another episode. There's a song called Mazel Tov by IDK and ASAP Ferg.
Okay.
I listened to it yesterday, and I asked a couple of people, "Is this offensive?" So I'm not going to go into too much detail. We're already towards the end of the show, but maybe in the next show, I'd love to get your opinion. Maybe I'll share the song with you in advance.
Share it with me. I won't listen to it. And I'll be
listen to it in advance, because I want to discuss it in advance, because I'm not sure how I felt about it.
Interesting.
I had an instinct that it was like, oh, I'm offended, but then I just started listening to music. I like the music, so I'm not sure if I was like overly sensitive to it, or maybe I just didn't understand it. So I'll share that with you.
All right. Well, this has been a full show, man. I mean, people get their money's worth, and they don't even spend a dime for this show. You got expert advice from Dr. Michelle Weiner. Then you get some commentary on DJs, hip hop DJs, and then some heavy herds. I mean, it doesn't get much better.
One thing I want to leave the audience with is my book. Making Cannabis Personal. So I was just asked by my publisher to mention it. I never mention it. I'm the worst self-promoter, but I'm doing the pre-order. So it's on publishizer.com/making cannabis personal. Making Cannabis Personal is the name of the book. I'm doing pre-sales. I think I have 7 days left to do my pre-sales, so that my publisher will release some marketing. We can print the books, get them into the stores, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, everywhere else. So I urge everybody, if you don't forget, just send us a
Well,
note.
and we'll link to that website in the description so you can pre-order it. We'll make it easier for you. And we are definitely, I know you are very good about not being, whatever, you have some you're the opposite of Donald Trump. You have some you don't like to brag and talk about yourself. But you know what? I'd love to have you as my guest on this show and on other shows to talk about your book, because I think it is interesting, and you certainly have a wealth of experience and knowledge. So we will do that when the book comes out. We will have a formal interview with you
Thanks,
on this
brother.
show, and I'm not going to make you embarrassed about promoting
it's fine.
yourself.
I'm good.
All
I'll
right.
just watch old Donald Trump tapes and practice.
Yeah. Just be like, I'm the best. I am the greatest. This is my book. Yep.
Yes.
It works. Got him elected. All
Cool,
right.
brother. Thank you all.
Thank you
everyone.
all. Great seeing you, everybody. I'm gonna send you out. I need to do you remember that old DJ that used to be on LA radio that would send you out with a bong hit? Remember that guy? Did you ever listen to that guy?
No.
Tom. He used to be like, people be like, send me out with a bong hit, and be like, so I might have to do that that sound effect.
I can record it for you if you want.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
actual
You can
live
record
recording.
it and I'll just put it in my system. But anyway, all right. Peace out, everybody.
All right.